I have a Jasmine shirt again. Because I tend to use Jasmine shirts, I guess, when I'm talking about either Vivi or Lily, I guess. So, time to talk about Princess Nefertari Vivi, or Nefertari D Vivi, depending on however you want to put that, or Queen Nefertari Vivi, as she will most likely be by the end of the story. Um, so, um, background. I do have a stuffed duck. I also have a stuffed peacock and the cobra and the poneglyph and the lilies, just because I'm like, there's a bunch of my Alabasta stuff. I can all go over here. I needed a stuffed duck because of Karu. What can I say? And I was like, I texted my mom yesterday while I'm sitting here doing my actual job. Not this, but my actual job. And I'm like, hey, do we have a stuffed duck anywhere? And she's like, I think so. And I'm like, where? And she's like, I don't remember. So I was like, well, if it's anywhere that it's not immediately apparent, it's probably in the garage. So last night when I was done with my actual job, I went into the garage and found the duck. So it's just a stuffed duck, and it works for this. So, Princess Nefertari Vivi currently is the sole remaining member of the Nefertari family, considering the fact that her father is dead, and as far as we are aware, she has no cousins or second cousins, third cousins, however far out you want to go. She probably does, like if you want to go really far back in the royal line of Alabasta, there's probably some very distant relatives, but in regards to like main branch of the royal family, Vivi is the last one left at this point in time. So yeah, there's that. And in regards to that, well, that would technically make her the Queen of Alabasta by default. So we'll see how all of that plays out. So, she's of course the former member of the bounty hunter agency called Baroque Works, where she was Miss Wednesday. I'm just gonna get the Miss Wednesday stuff to a degree right out of there in the first place. Of course, there's her original outfit. That's what it is in the manga, and then in the anime they changed it, make it a little bit more, I guess, appropriate. So it's like, fair enough. Not really too much else to say about that in regards to the outfit there. In regards to things about Vivi, she is 18 years old currently. She's 16 years old pre-time skip when we first meet her. The name Nefertari, I went over this a little bit with Cobra, but a little bit more here. The meaning of it is the most beautiful or most wonderful. And I mean, nothing against Shirahoshi or Rebecca or Viola or some of the other princesses that the Straw Hats have interacted with over the years, but Vivi is my favorite. And so the name Nefertari was generally used in regards to like queens and princesses in ancient Egypt, and then Oda just kind of used that when he did that. Although I think he admitted at some point in time that he didn't actually know what the word meant. He just used it. So that's one of those serendipitous things. And of course, there's the whole thing, of course, where Vivi was not initially meant to be a princess. She was just meant to be a member of Baroque Works as Miss Wednesday. And then Oda decided he needed a princess. And then he just turned Vivi into the princess. So, there's that. So, and that's a pretty common knowledge thing. Of course, Vivi is one of the few characters who is not a pirate to actually have her own Jolly Roger. That kind of, it's like the skull with like her hair and a little crown. And that just kind of appears when I think it's Igaram has like the slight little hallucination of seeing Vivi as a pirate. So there's that. And then yeah, there's not really too much else in regards to like trivia. Like, people have talked about like her favorite food. She's ranked rather high in most popularity polls over the years, which I agree with. I love Vivi. I think she's awesome. I have a whole video about why I think she should have Conqueror's Hockey, or why she should awaken her Conqueror's Hockey. Moving in regards to her personality, very much not fitting the stereotypical type of what you see with like princesses that are very needy and authoritative and whiny and demanding and patronizing and blah 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 blah. Where it's like a lot of princesses are like that. Not all princesses. There's a lot of other princesses in anime and in One Piece in general. Yeah, Shirahoshi is whiny, but that's because she's scared, not because she's like, oh my god, nobody brought me my favorite food. Like that's not the way that Shirahoshi even tends to act. She's that way because she has been locked up in a tower for the past, however many years, and has had constant threat to her life. But, even like Rebecca and Viola are not like the needy, typical types of princesses. Even within Whole Cake Island, there's, technically all of Big Mom's daughters, because she's a queen, they're all princesses. None of them really fit the needy type of a princess role. So Oda doesn't tend to stick with those, but in a lot of other anime and a lot of other stories in general, sometimes the princesses is very needy, spoiled type of character. Vivi is not like that at all. She very much holds her father's value of your job as the princess is to take care of your people, is to do what you can to take care of your people and make sure that they are safe. And we see Vivi demonstrate that to the nth degree, and the fact that, she is willing to, even if necessary, to sacrifice her own life in regards to try to save the people of Alabasta. And I'll mention this later on, when she's willing to blow up the palace at Alubarna in order to get the attention of the two armies, of the Revolutionary Army and the Alabasta army that are fighting in Alubarna at the time, to just destroy that, to try to get their attention, which there's other things you can blow up to get their attention that does not involve destroying a 5,000 year old palace. But whatever. Vivi has a very selfless nature. She can be a little bit reckless at times, but she tends to also be very good at being able to, determine what's going on in a situation, try to figure out a good plan of attack. So we do have that. Of course, in regards to her powers and abilities, she, of course, has, the authority in the country of being the princess. Technically, she would be a queen, or by the time she does, I guess, go through her full coronation ceremony, whenever that would be, she would become Queen Regnant. This is something I did not go over when I talked about Lily, but I may have possibly should have mentioned it. So within queens, there are different types of queens in regards to ruling and royal and stuff like that. So there is generally the typical queen is considered just to be like the queen consort, the wife of the king. And that is kind of like currently what's going on in England right now with King Charles and Queen Camilla. She is queen consort. And then there is what Queen Elizabeth was, which was a queen regent, which means that she is the one that is ruling, and then Prince Philip was just a prince consort. And then there are queen regents, which is what it is typically if, the king has died and the heir is not old enough to become queen, is not old enough to take the throne yet. Therefore, the queen is now queen regentess, and she is still technically in charge and ruling in her son or daughter's stead until they are old enough. That has happened multiple times throughout history. Some queen regents don't last very long. It depends on how much favor they have with the people. So Vivi, of course, has different authoritative power in that regard. She is very good when it comes to persuading people, because she helps like calm down Luffy at various points in times when they're having to deal with Wapol and different things that are going on in when they're on Drum Island. And in regards to her physical abilities, she does have some bit of lack of combat experience, but she is able to be strong enough to be able to become one of the numbered agents in Baroque works, or one of the paired in Baroque works, with being paired with Mr. Nine. So she's pretty up there in regards to how strong she was in that regard. But then again, we also saw some of the other members of Baroque works that are like, some of these are not all that strong in comparison to things down the line, obviously. But she apparently did a good enough job to get to that position in the first place. And of course, her main weapons are, of course, her peacock slashers, which I always liked those. I always thought those were kind of fun. So she has her peacock slashers, And she is pretty good with those. I would like to hope that over the last 2 years, she's at least done some form of, continued to practice with them. So she's able to, still fight and everything like that. She may not necessarily know about hockey, but I mean, possibly. I guess there's a possibility she's learned about it. Maybe it is something that she could learn from Chaka or, well, Pell, depending on wherever you want to stand with Pell and everything. Um, and so, also at one point in time, when Luffy, Zoro, and Sanji were all just, I guess, being idiots on the deck of the Mary, she just like picked up a giant mace or mallet or whatever and whacked them upside the heads to make them stop. um, or a broom or whatever in order to like make them stop, because I don't know if that was like them arguing over what to do when Nami was sick. So hopefully Vivi has gotten a little bit stronger in regard. She's probably gotten a little bit better when it comes to like some of her diplomacy and stuff like that. Which we're going to see various examples of her diplomacy and stuff like that now that we're getting into her actual history. So, as I said, she's 18 years old. She is the daughter of the late King Cobra and the late Queen Titi. And she, for the most part, as far as we're aware, her childhood was probably somewhat fairly normal. As in, like, she is a princess and she's raised in the palace and everything, and she has Karu there, who is her best friend. And generally what we see is, and it's shown by Cobra and in Vivi's flashbacks, that Vivi is not raised to be this little spoiled princess that is like this, damsel in distress type of thing. She never seemed to like subscribe to that concept. She, first time she meets Koza, they get into like a little fight with each other when Koza and his father visit the palace and everything. Vivi and Koza get into a little bit of fight. Because Koza, because Cobra didn't, I guess, give the right help that Koza had expected him to, in whatever reason. But then the two, Vivi and Koza got into a fight. And then later on, she ended up going out, and when he found out that he hit the princess, he got very nervous that something was going to happen to him. But it's just like, no, you're not going to get in trouble for that. It's fine. She's the one that provoked the fight, to a degree. And later on, Vivi goes out and ends up finding the Suna clan, and like Igaram and Cobra are like following her and like watching her, and she ends up finding Koza, and I think she ends up like getting into like scraps with like a bunch of the other people within the Suna clan. And she ends up getting to the point where she is like the sub leader or the co-leader of the Suna clan, the vice leader, however you want to put it, alongside Koza. And pretty much what ends up happening there is, I guess, she gets to spend a little bit of time with the other kids. So it's not like she's away from the children in isolation in the palace. So she gets to spend time with Koza and the other kids and gets to know them and everything. And then what ends up happening is, she becomes close with Koza's family and everything, with Koza's mother and father. And what ends up happening from there is, one of the days when Vivi's out with the Suna clan, Vivi actually ends up getting kidnapped. And the rest of the Suna clan had tried to do what they could to like fight off her kidnappers and everything, so that way she could either try to get away or, to keep Vivi safe, because she's their friend. Not only is she the princess, but she is also their friend, and she has proven herself to them in the fact that she is a good friend. And, Cobra and Igaram come across them, and they end up finding out, oh, Vivi was kidnapped, and, we tried to protect her, and, including Koza doing everything he could to protect her. Koza goes to the ruins and tries to actually save Vivi there himself. Cobra and Igaram show up along with Pell and Chaka, and they end up defeating all of the different kidnappers. But unfortunately, Koza ends up getting knocked out, I think, and he ends up having to he gets taken to the palace, and his injuries are cared for, and he eventually wakes up, and I think Vivi actually stays by his bed until he actually wakes up, because he's her best friend that is not a duck at that point in time. And so they have that, and then a little while after that is when Koza and his father head off to go to try to set up this new town of Yuba that's going to be this little oasis town. And Koza heads off to do that. And, Koza, thinks that Vivi's going to become a great princess. Surprise, surprise, she does. And, during the rest of that time frame, Vivi, you know, it gets to end up having, lots of other fun when it comes to spending time with Pell. She has a very good bond with Pell throughout her childhood and everything. And, he's like, I will never let any form of harm befall you as long as I live, no matter what. And so we have that. She would fly around on his back while he's in his, full-on falcon form and everything. And, then we move on to where we have her first interaction with Wapol. So, 8 years ago, so 2 reveries ago, of course, I've gone over this in Wapol's video and Dalton's video and Cobra's video, and now this one. Koza or Cobra and Wapol end up getting into an argument at the Council of Kings reverie. End up getting an argument there over Dragon, and Wapol, in an attempt to try to, provoke Alabasta because he's an idiot, ends up going and he slaps Vivi, this little child who was like 10 years old at that point in time. He slaps her and it knocks her down. And Vivi, of course, being the little diplomat that she is, just stands up and she apologizes for accidentally running into him and, all of that, because she doesn't want to cause a war between Drum Island and Alabasta, which, as I stated in the Cobra video, I'm quite certain that Alabasta would have been able to wipe Drum Island off the map if they wanted to very easily. But I also don't think that Cobra and Vivi, that Cobra would have ended up being like this, oh, you've slapped my child, I will now raise an army and I will, turn your island into ash. Your island of snow will become nothing but a pitted wasteland. That's not something Cobra would do anyway. But, Vivi impresses, Dalton with her diplomacy and everything. And she ends up crying afterwards because, she just got slapped. So, I don't blame her if she wants to start crying. So there's that. Then we jump ahead several years and, we get into where Baroque works is starting to become an issue. So at some point in time, Crocodile became a member of the 7 Warlords of the Sea, the Shishibukai, and he came to Alabasta, where he ended up setting up, it was either Rain Dinners or Rain Base, I can never remember which one it is, but he sets up his casino, and, starts slowly trying to win over the, the approval of the people of Alabasta, bring their approval away from the royal family and to him, because he wants to try to pull what, of course, Doflamingo pulled in, Dressrosa. And so Crocodile's, working on that and everything. And in the background, he's acting as Mr. Zero within Baroque Works and building up all of his different agents there and everything. It has Robin and all of that. And Vivi ends up getting a hold of this information about Baroque Works, that there's these Baroque Works people that are trying to infiltrate Alabasta and they want to bring down the kingdom. So she decides, she decides that she's going to go and she's going to infiltrate Baroque Works. And she ends up bringing along Igaram, who is, of course, the captain of the guard, the captain of the royal guard, with her. Well, he kind of found out, and then he just okay, fine, I am coming with you because I'm not letting you do this on your own. Bear in mind, I think Vivi leaves when she's 14 to go and join Baroque Works. But then again, Miss Golden Week is also on the much younger side during the whole arc anyway with Baroque Works, when they're dealing with Mr. 3 and, Miss Golden Week anyway. So it's Vivi being 14 when she joins is not, that surprising. Throughout that course in time, she becomes, Miss Wednesday, and Igaram ends up becoming, I think he becomes Mr. 8. Yes, it's his alias, and he gets paired with Miss Monday, and Vivi is paired with Mr. 9. And, they work their way up through the ranks and get to the point where they are, named agents within the organization, which is, already, it's just well, they got to that point in time, so that already shows that Vivi is willing to put in the work. Now, we, of course, that, we as an audience know that like Vivi and Igaram, they had, their plan of Baroque works is, of course, they trap a bunch of different pirates on Whiskey Peak and then they hand them in for the bounties, and that's how they do that. So kind of the first thing that we end up interacting with them is, Vivi and Igaram are willing to do what they need to, complete their mission of finding out who Mr. Zero is and all of that, and finding out as much information about the upper workings of Baroque works as much as possible. And they're willing to do what they ever need to do with that. So that kind of implies that Vivi and Igaram have probably both killed people that were, pirates or whatever else that were showing up. Admittedly, most of the other pirates probably ended up being like the bad types of pirates that would show up at Whiskey Peak, but still, And then we get into the Reverse Mountain arc and everything like that, where we get the start of the Alabasta arc. During this time frame, of course, the Straw Hats have arrived and they're interacting with Laboon and Crocus. And Vivi and Mr. Nine are actually running around, I think, within Laboon, trying to find a way to kill him to get the meat so they can, use him to feed the people at Whiskey Peak. And I'm like, there's got to be a much better way of doing this. But, the Straw Hats end up dealing with them, and, Luffy ends up just knocking them out pretty easily. I do like Mr. Nine and Miss Wednesday. I love their aesthetic and everything. How that Vivi really gets into character with the way that they interact with each other, and I'm going to get to this in a minute. But Mr. Nine and Miss Monday do prove to be actual very good friends to Vivi and Igaram, and I'll get to that in a few minutes. But what ends up happening is, of course, Vivi and Miss Wednesday at this point in time. Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine end up deciding that, well, if we trick these pirates and we bring them to Whiskey Peak, then we can see if they have bounties and we can get the money for the bounties. And we can do all of that. And they're like, okay, well, that's what we'll do. So they, they offer to lead them to, bring them to Whiskey Peak, which is, of course, I think they keep Vivi or Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine tied up on the deck for a certain amount of time while they're on their way there. And they eventually get there, and, after everything happens with Laboon, which Miss Wednesday and Mr. Nine aren't really all that involved in what happens with Laboon. It's, Luffy ends up making the whale his friend and convincing it to stop trying to beat its head against the red line. So, we get that. And then we get to Whiskey Peak, where, of course, Igaram as Mr. 8 is pretending to be the mayor, and, and Vivi and Mr. 9, trick everybody, trick the pirates. Nami and Zoro don't entirely fall for it. Most of the rest of the crew do, though. And they end up falling for it hook, line, and sinker in regards to eventually all passing out and everything. And, eventually it does result in, the Baroque Works agents that are all there in Whiskey Peak are like, okay, well, now it's time to try to get, if we take out the captain and the first mate, because they're the only two that have bounties, if we take out them, then we can get their bounties and we'll just get rid of the other ones and we'll just add their names to our graveyard, our little graveyard area. So they start trying to do that and everything and starting to capture the Straw Hats, which of course results in, Nami revealing that she tricked them anyway and went to go and try to steal their money. Zoro didn't really fall for it anyway, and he starts fighting them, including Miss Monday and all of that. And what ends up happening is partway through this battle, or partway through this whole big skirmish, is when, we get to meet Karu, and Vivi's running around on Karu and everything and using her peacock slashers. And Mr. 5 and Miss Valentine's Day are the ones that show up. And they reveal that they're there to capture the Princess of Alabasta, revealing that it is Vivi. And they're like, well, our boss told us to get you, and that's why we're here. So they're there, and that's their job. So, they start trying to, attack Vivi and attack Igaram. And Mr. 9 and Miss Monday are like they have an option here. They could either turn against Igaram and Vivi and try to help, try to stop them and, capture them for Baroque Works and probably get a reward. But and I went over this when I was doing like all the different couples videos the other a year or two ago. Mr. Nine and Miss Monday are both like, no, Igaram and Vivi are our friends. They've been our partners for the past, 2 years or whatever. We're not going to betray them. We have more of a bond with them than we do with you guys. So, Mr. Nine and Miss Monday end up trying to help Vivi and Igaram and try to protect them against, Mr. Five and Miss Valentine's Day, which I just love that. So it's just like, applause to them. I love them. They're great. And now 2 years later, currently in the timeline, they have like a little baby and they're probably like keeping up with the exploits and probably quite concerned, in all honesty, in regards to like finding out that like Vivi's father is dead and like Vivi is missing, in regards to that. So yeah. What ends up happening is, of course, Nami ends up overhearing all of this conversation and she ends up like, oh, well, we'll help you. We'll help get Vivi to safety, but it'll cost you. Makes that deal with them. And, Vivi ends up explaining to them what's going on. Yeah, I'm actually the Princess of Alabasta, and I came here undercover with Igaram to try to find out who Mr. One is so we could try to save our country from Baroque works and everything. And, initially, obviously, this little relationship, this little, exchange of goods is the Straw Hats are going to be paid to take Vivi to Alabasta. And once she's there, then they'll get paid, and, Vivi can warn her father about Crocodile and try to stop this revolution from happening. And it starts off literally as that. And as they're leaving, and I think Dami made it, was like, it would be like 1 billion berries is, I think, what the asking price is for them to try to save Vivi, is try to help her and everything. And Igaram agrees and Vivi agrees and everything. But she doesn't want to make a contract with the Straw Hats for saving her, because she explains that the kingdom is in turmoil because of everything that's going on. And if it becomes apparent that she was working with pirates, then that's not going to help things with their country. That just might make them look worse to their country at the time. So as they're leaving, Igaram has dressed up like Vivi and he is acting as a distraction, which he gets, his ship, little dinghy ship that he's on, gets blown up, unfortunately. And, Vivi is watching this when it happens, and Nami in that instant, because Nami knows exactly what it's like to lose people that you are, very, very close to, and everything that happened with Belmere and all of that, which was very recent in regards to, all of those memories being brought up with what just happened in Arlong Park, like, 3 arcs ago, which was probably like a couple of days ago, in all honesty. And we get this moment where Nami actually like pulls Vivi into her and like actually like hugs her, and tries to like calm her down. And she, and like the rest of the crew are running around getting the ship ready so they can head off toward the next island. And Nami is telling Vivi, it's like, it's okay. These guys are strong. If anyone can take down a warlord of the sea, it's going to be them. And in retrospective, those words have been exceedingly true. They take down Crocodile, they take down Moria, they take down Doflamingo. They take down a lot of the different warlords of the sea thus far. Kuma doesn't really fall into that category because theirs were extenuating circumstances in that regard. And in all honesty, if you want to take it in a different way, Boa Hancock would be quite happy if Luffy would take her down. But, so Vivi and Nami and the rest of the crew are, headed off away from Whiskey Peak. And, Vivi kind of tries to, she tries to like reason with them to try to get it down to like a better price in regards to like helping them, in regards to like paying them to help her. And on their way leaving, they end up interacting with Robin, Miss All Sunday. And she ends up, of course, threatening them and saying, hey, if you guys just, I'm going to give you this log post. If you guys go to this island and just stay away from everything, then, you don't have to be worried. You don't have to worry about it. You don't have to worry about Alabasta and blah, 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 blah. I think he even gives them the option of, like, keeping Vivi with them as opposed to, like, taking Vivi back to Alabasta, but, like, they refuse and turn it down and just destroy the log post. And then they end up going to Little Garden. And while they're on Little Garden, this is where Vivi's bond with the crew really starts to form much more than it had just in that short bit of time that they were on Whiskey Peak. Because they go from being this kind of like, okay, please help me get back to my country and I will pay you. Throughout the course of Little Garden, they go to actually being friends. And I love how this goes because, they land on Little Garden and they're like, okay, well, we need to look around for supplies and everything, and we have to wait for the log post to set before we can move on to the next island. So they're all out exploring, and Vivi, Karu, and Usopp, or no, it's Vivi, Karu, and Luffy, excuse me, end up interacting with Dory. And then, of course, they find out about Broggy and their battle and everything. There are, so many different battles and jousting and everything like that they've been through up to that point in time. And eventually what ends up happening is, of course, Mr. Five and Miss Valentine's Day end up finding them as well. And of course, during the same time frame, Mr. Three and Miss Golden Week are, of course, roaming around the island as well. And the four of them are working together to capture Vivi and, defeat the Straw Hats. And, so we're seeing all of that. And of course, Nami, Zoro, and Vivi all end up on the giant, wax cake thing by Mr. Three, slowly getting turned into wax statues. And, Zoro tries to cut his feet off. Vivi's like, you are an idiot. Zoro's like, fine, then I'm just going to pose like a cool statue. And this was the moment when both Nami and Vivi realized that out of all of the members of the Straw Hats, even though Vivi was not technically a member of the Straw Hats at that point, they were the two that had the most brain cells out of everybody on the crew. More than the rest of the crew combined. Because Sanji and Zoro just instantly go into the hunting contest almost as soon as they're on the island. And, Luffy is Luffy, and he doesn't really have that many brain cells to begin with, to a degree. So we'll see how, that's all of that. And of course, they end up getting out of the, wax cake and everything, because I think it's Usopp. Does Usopp get them out with a fire star, or is it a different thing that happens? But it's like one of the two, and, they, Karu unfortunately ends up getting hurt during this time frame, and they end up, getting help. And, Luffy shows up, and Usopp shows up, and, Dory and Broggy, they save Dory and Broggy and everything. And there's this great moment where, it's not a giant cake, it's a candelabra. Excuse me. Sorry. Kind of looks like a giant cake at times. So we don't hit giant wedding cakes until much, much later. Different group of islands. And another woman with her own issues with giants. But what ends up happening is, of course, they escape the giant candelabra because it gets set on fire. And we get this great entrance between like Nami and Vivi, and we get actually like the moment where they're actually kind of bonding, which I like, with the two of them. So I like that moment. And, they're able to defeat Mr. Three and Miss Golden Week and Mr. Five and Miss Valentine. They're able to defeat all of them and escape. And, they help Dory and Broggy. And, so we get that interaction there. And they're, okay, well, now you gotta, get to, Alabasta. And I think they end up getting an internal pose from one of the Baroque Works agents. I think Mr. Three had an internal pose, so they just take his instead. And then they, of course, have to get past the giant goldfish that Dory and Broggy just kind of turn into a giant fish donut. From there, we move into, of course, Drum Island. During the Drum Island arc, we, of course, have it that on the way to Drum Island is when Nami starts to get sick. And, the rest of the crew are very much, trying to take care of her as best they can. And Vivi is doing everything she can because at this point in time, she is now friends with the Straw Hats, given what they just went through at Little Garden. And they're trying to, save, they want to get Nami better. And they're like, okay, well, we need to get to an island with a doctor. And first they end up having to deal with Wapol and his crew. And, she recognizes Wapol and knows exactly who she is from, a little bit about 6 years ago, I think, at that point in time. So she recognizes Wapol. And then they end up getting their way to Drum Island. She somewhat recognizes Wapol. I don't think she quite figures out that it's the same guy until a little bit later. But they get to Drum Island, where they then interact with the townspeople and with Dalton. While there, you know, Luffy kind of tries to like threaten them into giving them help, and Vivi's like, "No, Luffy, you can't do that. These people haven't done anything wrong. There's no point in trying to threaten them to try to give us a doctor. That doesn't work." So Vivi is actually the one that ends up like, you know, bending down and asking for help. And, you know, Luffy ends up copying her. He's like, this is one of those moments where it's just like your pride is on the line. And he's like, yeah, I have to ask for help. And he does the same thing. And Dalton, Dalton eventually does recognize that it is the same little girl that he saw years ago at Reverie, but not yet. And, you know, so they're like, okay, well, yeah, we can tell you where there's a doctor on the island. She's kind of a witch, living on top of the mountain. Um, so Luffy and Sanji with Nami end up, of course, heading off toward the Drum Rockies to climb up to where the castle is. And Vivi and Usopp actually end up kind of staying in town and end up talking with Dalton a lot, and they end up kind of like riding around with Dalton a little bit, and trying to get to these different towns to try to figure out where Kureha is. And Vivi mentions a few things, and that kind of makes Dalton a little bit suspicious of her, not in a bad way, but just trying to figure out why he recognizes her. And Vivi just ends up like changing the subject a lot whenever Dalton gets, I guess, close to like recognizing her. And at one point in time, Usopp falls into the snow, and Vivi ends up like having to like dig him out of the snow and like slap him so he doesn't actually, you know, go unconscious and go into like a coma from being in the snow for too long. So we have those funny moments. And then we get into much more serious stuff where we have it that, of course, Wapol shows up and starts trying to, you know, take the island back and fights against Dalton, and Dalton is protecting the island, and Vivi is watching this. And I think during that time frame is when Vivi figures out that Wapol is the guy that slapped her like 6 years ago at the Reverie. And Dalton, you know, fights against Wapol, and Vivi ends up, you know, after the avalanche comes, after Dalton's been shot with arrows by Chess. Yeah, Chess is, I think, the one that has arrows. Yeah, Chess is the bow and arrow one, I believe. Because Kurimarimo is one of the weird hairballs, if I remember correctly. But what ends up happening is, of course, Vivi and Usopp are trying to, like, help dig Dalton out of the snow along with everybody else that's in the village. And, of course, Zoro shows up, and he ends up helping. And they're able to get Dalton out. And Vivi and Dalton and Usopp, after Dalton has been treated by the Ishi 20, the doctors and everything that have been working for Wapol up at that point in time, they're able to like help Dalton and get him, you know, better and more stable. And then they're all heading back up to the castle, heading their way up to the castle via the ski lifts, which why they didn't do that in the first place, I don't know, but whatever. I think it was like something about, oh, they haven't been reconnected yet or whatever. I'm like, they shouldn't be that hard to reconnect in all honesty, but okay, whatever. And on their way up there, you know, once they get up there, they see that, you know, I think they arrive after Luffy has defeated Wapol, and they defeated Chess and Kurimarimo and everything. And everything happens with Chopper. I think that's after they get there, or that's all takes place before they get there. And Usopp even tried to like help carry Dalton, but that didn't go well. And then Zoro just did it, which is just funny. It's like, hey, Usopp tried to step up. Usopp gets points. Usopp gets a lot of points throughout the entire series. Actually, most of the Straw Hats get a lot of points throughout the entire series. And what ends up happening is, of course, they end up getting all the way up to the castle, and they, you know, get to meet Chopper, and they see that Nami is doing much better. And then it's, you know, it's time for them to leave, and Luffy is, of course, asked Chopper to join the crew, and Chopper agrees. And they headed down back to the Mary, and they head off, and they all get a watch as the, you know, the giant, you know, cherry blossom snow thing happens in the sky. And you know, he gets all better, you know, they're all fine. And Karu was like having fun in that time as well, I guess. Um, Karu had tried to save Zoro because Zoro had, I guess, decided to go swimming in the freaking freezing ocean outside of a winter island because Zoro is an idiot. And Karu tried to save him, and he got very, very frozen in the process of Vivi's having to take care of Karu. Um, and so we have all of that. And then we move into Alabasta arc, which is the big main thing for Vivi, of course. So, of course, as they're on their way to Alabasta, Vivi she's enjoying spending time with her new friends because now, given everything they've been through with, Little Garden and now with Drum Island, they are friends. And they end up coming across Mr. Two, Bone Clay. And, via him going through and like showing off all of his different faces, she recognizes her father's face. And she figures out that okay, he's part of the problem for what keeps happening because she keeps reading in the newspaper about everything that's happened with like the revolution, with the Revolutionary Army building itself up within Alabasta with like Koza's Revolutionary Army. And this is before I think we've been told really anything about Dragon and his Revolutionary Army at that point in time. So that's just what we have there. And what ends up happening is, of course, they end up landing at one of the towns. It's not Nanohana. Or is it Nanohana that they land at first? One of the two. They land at one of the towns, one of the port towns, and of course they need to go get supplies and they need to get clothes, so they're ready to be roaming around within Alabasta and everything. And they end up Luffy finds Ace, and Ace ends up, with them for a little while, just, meets the rest of the crew and everything. And Nami and Vivi, of course, end up into their pretty dancer girl outfits, thanks to Sanji, which, hey, I like the outfits. They look nice on the girls. I'm not going to argue with that. And they end up having to then, they deal with Smoker and the Marines, and they end up escaping. And then, of course, they, meet Ace and everything that happens there. And then they need to start making their way into Alabasta because they need to make their way to Yuba because Vivi's like, well, Yuba is where the Revolutionary Army, that's the last place she knew Koza had been, and that's most likely where they're going to be. Unbeknownst to her, Koza has actually moved, and they're actually at Urumala, whatever it's called, one of the other towns. And, Aramalu, whatever it's called. So they end up having to deal with all of that. And then there's all the other different weird birds and lizards that they have to deal with throughout the course of going through the Alabasta desert and everything like that. And the Kung Fu dugongs that I love. They're adorable. And they end up, dealing with, Scissors, the crab. And they end up making their way to Yuba. And while they're there, they end up actually seeing all of this damage that has been done. There's, the town has been almost destroyed. They find, citizens that were unable to make their way out and died in the process. And we see how much this is affecting Vivi. Because she's like in her mind, she's like, I left 2 years ago because I needed to find out who was going to try to destroy my country. And now during that whole time frame that I was gone, all of this bad stuff has been happening in my country. And I wasn't here to do anything to try to stop it. And now because, and like they know that it's Crocodile at this point in time, is the one that's in charge of Baroque Works and everything is Mr. Zero. She's like, and now even though I know all of this information, I still need to get this information to my father. But I can't do that yet. And maybe if I'd been here, maybe things wouldn't have been as bad. So there's this back and forth with some stuff. And they end up finding Toto, who is Koza's father. And she doesn't recognize him at all at first. So then he explains who he is. And she's like, oh my God, what happened? And, he's like explaining to her, it's like dust storms kept coming and everything. And she's like, it has to be Crocodile. And like they know about the rain powder at this point in time, the rain dance powder that's Crocodile has been using to like steal the rain from other places within the kingdom. And of course he's been manipulating people and, putting on this performance of being the savior of Alabasta and everything. And what ends up happening is, of course, Vivi at one point, she like sends Karu off to go to try to get to the capital so that way he can deliver a message from her to her father and to Igaran, or well, not Igaran, but Shaka and Pell and everything, and send them the information. So that way they're able to start trying to, mount an attack. And of course, during the same time frame, Koza has moved the Revolutionary Army, and he is working the Rebel Army, and is working on getting them set up to go and try to fight against the Alabasta Army. The Straw Hats end up at rain dinners at the casino, and Nami, Luffy, is it Zoro and Usopp? Is it all four of them? And then Smoker, all end up getting trapped by Crocodile. And Sanji doesn't, I know that. And then Vivi ends up getting her way in. And Vivi, for her part, she's like, screw it. If I can try to take him out now, then I'm good. And she tries to use her peacock slashers to take out Crocodile. But of course, he's a Sand Logia, so it doesn't do anything. And he just reforms his head. If Vivi had known Haki, had known, even a little bit of armament Haki at that point in time, and attacked Crocodile, she may not have been able to hurt him, but she probably would have at least been able to catch him by surprise. The fact that she knew Haki, but that's not the case at this point in time, because we as an audience didn't know about Haki at that point in time anyway. So, Vivi tries to attack Crocodile and tries to save her friends. She gets captured, and they end up they also end up meeting Eyelash, the camel, at some point in time during all of this. And what ends up happening is, Crocodile, leaves them James Bond style of oh, well, you can't get out of this, blah, 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 blah. I'm going to leave now, so I don't even know if this is going to work. It's stay there, make sure they die. That is the smarter move. That's the problem that all the Bond villains make, and Crocodile is based off of a James Bond villain, that typical James Bond villain. So they end up escaping because Sanji is there under his alias of Mr. Prince, and he's able to help get them out and save them from drowning / the banana crocodile banana wanies that are adorable. And so we're dealing with all of that, and then of course they have to deal with Miss All Sunday is there, and she's using her powers to, stop the different guards trying to save Vivi and stop the Marines and causing problems there. And, just having all of these issues going on. And she ends up stopping Pell and, causing problems there. And, Vivi and the others are, they end up on, this is where they end up on Snips the crab, Hasame the crab. And, he's carrying them out of Alabasta, or out of rain dinners, whatever, toward Alubarna. And what ends up happening is, Crocodile's hook just kind of comes out of nowhere and snatches Vivi, but Luffy pulls her out, and he gets taken instead and takes her place, and promises to meet them at Alubarna. And of course, this is when Luffy has his whole first big fight really with Crocodile in that regard and everything, and where he gets stabbed through and all of the liquid drained out of him, and ends up, getting saved by Robin and everything, and getting found by Pell. And, during that time frame, the super spot build Ducks troops or squadrons, or however you want to put that, Karu and his buddies show up. And all the Straw Hats ride them, and Vivi all ride them toward Alubarna, where they develop the plan of okay, well, we all have these X's on our arms and the bandages around them. X's on the left arm, and bandages on them, so we're able to hide, since Mr. 2 copied a bunch of our faces and everything, so we don't want that to be, we need to make sure that we can recognize each other. And of course they do the whole thing of okay, well, you guys head here and do this, and then Vivi is going to wait here, and then she's going to try to intercept the two armies and try to stop the two armies from fighting. And for Vivi's, for Vivi's part, she tries, but the two armies just start fighting. The Rebel Army and the Alabasta Army just start fighting and everything. And, it's the Rebels are at the point because, Mr. 2 has been pretending to be Cobra because he's been captured, and they're pretending to be, he's been pretending to be Cobra and causing all these problems and giving Cobra this horrible image to the public at that point in time. And even Koza, who knew Cobra back when Koza, knew Cobra when he was a child, is okay, this doesn't quite seem right, but this is all that we've been given, and we need to we need to do something to save our country and everything like that. And Koza was driven to desperation and everything. Um, and at one point in time, Vivi ends up coming across Usopp, and then she like, okay, I don't think this is actually Usopp. And she sees through Mr. Two's disguise and everything, and then her and Karu run off, and they end up getting into the palace of Alubarna, where they're able to then start talking to Chaka. And at one point in time, this is when Vivi is just like, okay, well, we need to figure out a way of getting the two fighting armies' attention and make them stop fighting so I can explain what's going on. And that's when she comes up with the idea of like, okay, well, let's blow up the castle. I'm like, okay, that's probably not the best idea, but you need something, I guess. Although admittedly later on there is the giant explosion from Crocodile's bomb, and that didn't really do too much in regards to making the two different armies stop. It's like giant bomb goes off and they all stop and look, and they just go back to fighting each other. So that didn't really make much of a difference. So blowing up the palace at Alubarna may have made some form of a difference, but it would have kind of been a waste, I would have thought, in my opinion. But Vivi she's desperate. She needs to figure out something. And of course, during this time frame, Crocodile shows up and he reveals that he has her father captive, and he, is threatening Vivi, and he's, holding her over the side of the building and everything, as the villain does. And he drops her. And of course, this is right when Luffy shows up and he saves her, when Luffy and Pell shows up and they save Vivi. And Luffy's like, don't worry, we'll get this fixed. And Vivi's like, but my voice won't reach them anymore. Nobody can hear me. As in, like, nobody's listening in regard to her trying to make them stop fighting. And, Luffy drops her off and he goes and he fights Crocodile again and becomes, Water Luffy with the water from Yuba. And that ends up helping him fight Crocodile, but he still ends up kind of getting knocked down again. And then he gets the water again and he gets better. And then he goes off to deal with Crocodile and fights him. And at this point in time, Vivi and the others have found out that there is the bomb, so they need to then figure out where the bomb is. Because I think Crocodile mentioned the bomb. And they're like, okay, well, we need to figure out where the bomb is. And, during this whole time is when, Robin and Crocodile are down in the tombs talking, or Robin and Crocodile and Cobra are down in the tombs, and then Luffy shows up and fights against Crocodile and everything. And Vivi and the rest of the Straw Hats are running around because like all the Straw Hats have finished up their individual fights with the different Baroque Works agents and everything. And they're all running around like, okay, well, we need to, find where this bomb is. And they do end up finding it, and it's in the clock tower, and it's being guarded by Mr. Seven and Miss Father's Day, which, Vivi tries to defuse the bomb, but it's a time bomb instead. And of course, that's when Pell shows up, grabs it and flies off into the sky and carries the bomb away, and it blows up. And, as I said, kind of grabs the attention of the people that are fighting, and then it just kind of stops, and then they go back to fighting. And we have Vivi on the clock tower just shouting at them, which I'm like, okay, go find a Den Den Mushi and yell into that. That's connected to this, giant, system that's, the speaker system all around the country. Go do that. That probably would work better. And of course, during this time frame, Luffy defeats Crocodile and sends him skyrocketing into the air. And this is when it starts raining and everything. And it makes the two armies stop fighting. And this allows them to be able to, see that Crocodile is the problem, and the Marines can come in and they start calming everybody down, and everything gets worked out. And what ends up happening is, of course, during her time on the Merry, Vivi became very good friends with the Straw Hats. They just helped save her country and her father and everything, and her. And so what ends up happening is, of course, the Straw Hats stay at the palace for several days, and they end up, of course, having like the big feast. And then, of course, they have the time, where they're all in the bathroom. And, Vivi and Nami are talking. And of course, later that night is when Luffy basically gives Vivi the offer of like, well, would you like to join us? Would you like to become a member of the crew and travel with us? And, Vivi, of course, goes through this whole thing where she's like, I could go with them. I can go and be a pirate and be a member of the Straw Hat crew and be with my friends and everything. But I also just spent 2 years away from my country and things got really bad here. And I don't know if I need to stay with my country and everything. And of course, she's going through all of that thought. And we, of course, the next day, the Straw Hats waited where they told Vivi that they would meet her, where they would be waiting for her. And Vivi, of course, does her big, her speech over the Dendenmushi, over the whole island and everything. And she's in her princess garb and everything. And, the Straw Hats want her to, well, most of the Straw Hats. Zoro is indifferent either way, or at least he gives off the appearance of being indifferent either way, but the rest of the crew all want Vivi to come with them. And Vivi does her whole speech about, I need to stay here in my country, but I thank you guys so much, and that I hope that, if we ever do see each other again, that you will still call me your friend. And of course, we have one of my favorite moments in all of One Piece where, all the Straw Hats, because they're like, the Marines are showing up and they're trying to chase him. We're just like, okay, well, we can't actually vocally acknowledge her because I can get Vivi in trouble. So they all raise up, of course, their left arms with the X's on them. And Vivi and Karu raise up their left arm and left wing and everything. And, have, that great moment there of, the eight of them all, showing that, yes, they are friends. Yes, we are friends to the end and everything. And, if you ever do show back up again, of course, you are more than welcome to be, a member of the crew type of a thing. And of course, Vivi stays there and she's going to be the princess of Alabasta because her country needs her. And the next kind of, check-in we get with Vivi is during the Garatsu's accidental blue sea life, where, Garatsu has, fallen from Skypiea and he lands on an island near Alabasta. And of course, he helps develop this hot spring place. And, Vivi and several of her other retainers and guards and stuff like that go there, and they have a nice time in the the hot springs and all of that. So we have that. And then the next one we get is during post-Ennis lobby, where we have it that, where we see, Cobra and Igaram and Shaka and Pell, and, wherever you want to stand on whether or not Pell survived or not, wherever you want to stand for that is up to you. Should have survived, however it went. They're all there and they're like, oh, well, I guess Luffy had Robin join his crew. What are you? And they're like worried that Vivi's going to be mad about that. And she's just like, no, it's fine. It's like, she didn't have a problem with it. She's fine with it. It's like, if Luffy let her join the crew, there's a reason behind it. And if it's, someday she'll find out what the reason is. Vivi probably read all about what happened at Ennis Lobby and everything like that with Luffy standing up for Robin. So there's that. She's glad that they're, being taken care of, and that all the Straw Hats are taking care of each other and everything. And that she's been reading along in the newspaper about all of their different exploits and everything. And then, of course, we get to the post-war arc after, the, Marineford War. And, we see Vivi and Karu reading about everything in the newspaper, and they see Luffy with the, 3D2Y on his arm, and she figures it out pretty quickly. And, I mean, of all honesty, if, after 2 years if Vivi had shown up at, Sabaody when the rest of the crew did, that would have been kind of fun. But, given the fact that Reverie goes pretty much very soon after that, that probably wouldn't have lined up very well. And what ends up happening is, of course, so Vivi probably figured out what it meant about Luffy's arms and everything. And then, of course, we cut to 2 years later where we have, the different decks of the world. We see Vivi going around Alabasta and being around her people and everything. And she has Karu and Eyelashes the camel. Who, they follow her around as guards, and then she goes and she visits her father, who's currently bedridden at the time, and everything in regards to Cobra's declining health. And then we cut ahead after Whole Cake Island, or during the Whole Cake Island saga, where we have, the decks of the world again, the 500 million berry man arc, where we see all of the Luffy, or where we see them learning about Luffy's new bounty after defeating Doflamingo and all of that, and all of them are just she's very happy for them and everything, and Luffy's exploits and everything in the tabloids. And then we get to the Zoe arc where we see we check in with Vivi and the rest of her entourage and everything, and her father leaving Alabasta and getting ready to head to the Reverie, where they are escorted by Hina to get to Marijois. And then, of course, the next bit is when they're actually in Reverie, where we have, Vivi meets, Rebecca and Shirahoshi and Viola, and gets to see Dalton and Kureha again, and gets to have this whole fun bit where it's like we have all of these different interactions of like all these different people that have, of course, been helped and are allies, secret allies to a degree of the Straw Hats, all meeting each other together, whose kingdoms have all been saved, all these different princesses whose kingdoms have been saved by Luffy and everything. And so we have all of that. So that's just like this fun bit there. And, it's like fun stuff there. And then it gets, a little bit more serious when, Wapol shows up, and Vivi is, very angry at Wapol, and then she's just happy to see Dalton, and then like all this other stuff. And then we have everything that happens with Charlos, where, Charlos shows up and he's trying to take Shirahoshi as his slave. And of course, Vivi is standing up to, trying to make them stop, trying to make Charlos stop, trying to make the, CP0 agents intervene and save Shirahoshi and everything. And, glaring daggers at Lucci, which I love. It's like, go Vivi. And all of that. And like she's witness to Milzigard showing up and, whacking Charlos across the head with his giant mallet and everything, and taking care of that and saving Shirahoshi. And, so we get all of that. We see Vivi wanting to make sure that Shirahoshi is okay and everything. We know that later on, Vivi is there and talking with Shirahoshi and Rebecca as I think it's Malsheri heals Shirahoshi from the little injury she got from dealing with Charlos. And, from there, Vivi is very protective of Shirahoshi, because not just because she's Luffy's friend, but because now she's Shirahoshi's friend. Shirahoshi and her are friends too. Same thing with Rebecca. And we end up seeing that, we know that that Cobra and Rikudo III have done these big speeches about like the turmoil that the 7 warlords of the sea, that Crocodile and Doflamingo respectively, have caused their countries and everything. So we get all of that, and we have the warlord system is disbanded, is abolished and everything. So there's all of that. And then we have it where we get kind of more into some more of the information that we're getting about what actually happened. So we know that during the time frame that everything was happening with Wano and all of the stuff still happening with like Reverie, that during the time when the Revolutionary Army commanders attacked the Reverie, they end up, they're causing all this problem in the domains of the gods and everything. And, Charlos tries to attack Shirahoshi again, and he gets, accordioned by Leo and Sai. And Vivi was trying to figure out a way of like helping Shirahoshi, and she had been arguing with Lucci. And we know that she ends up getting captured by CP0, whether or not it was Lucci specifically that captured her, or if it was one of the other ones that grabbed her. But we see her talking to Khalifa and I know the name, it's not Kaku, Jabra. Khalifa and Jabra and stuff, and they're basically hint the fact that you're gonna end up being turned in, you're gonna go missing, and you're gonna get turned into like a pet for someone, as in like Vivi's gonna get turned into a slave type of a thing. Although they probably don't know specifically that it's like Imu is the one, Imu-sama is the one that wants her. So Vivi, of course, ends up finding out that, Shirahoshi is okay, but she gets told about like Leo and Sai and how they were, how they attacked Charlos again and then exclaimed that they were members of the Straw Hat Grand Fleet in front of an entire courtyard full of royals and other leaders and rulers and everything. So there's that. And what ends up happening from there is, of course, Vivi ends up figuring out that she needs to figure out a way to escape because she's like, oh, I'm not going to be taken down that easily. And of course, then we hear, and then she's just like sitting there, and then they start hearing this like shaking and crashing, and then comes through the wall, Wobble, and she's like, okay, well, this is the best option I have. So this is the option that has been presented to me, and I am going to take it. And she somehow ends up getting, her chair, knocks her chair enough that she ends up on, by Wapple, and she ends up somehow in his mouth, which is not a sanitary place to be or a safe place to be, given his devil fruit. But she ends up there, and, he's running away. And we get the soap opera moment, as I call it, where we have Vivi and Wapple running away. And Cinderella, who is Wapple's wife, sees them. And she's like, Vivi's like, where are you going, Wapple? And he's just like, as far away from here as possible, or the end of the world. And she's like, good, take me with you. And Cinderella hears parts of this, and she's just like, oh no, he's got a mistress and everything. And it's just like, please, dear God, let there be soap opera overreacting when this happens in the anime. Please, dear God. And then we move into the much more current events for what's happening for the Egghead arc. So currently, we know Vivi's current location is in the economic world times, whatever you want to call it, with Morgans and Wapple. She is there. She is aware of the fact that her father is dead. She's aware of the fact that it appears to be Sabo that did it. Whether or not she 100% knows that Luffy is Sabo's brother is left up for debate because we don't know that yet. We don't know if she's aware of that yet. But she has gone through, she's like, okay, I need to do what I need to. I've done my crying. I can cry again later, but right now I need to either get to Luffy and the others, or I need to figure out a way of getting home, or I need to do whatever. So she's ready to deal with that. And I would love it if she, if Morgan's and her and Wapple, because Wapple, I guess, ends up at, if Wapple is ever going to tell her what he saw happen with her father and the Gorosei and Emu and everything. If Wapple's going to ever tell her what he saw, I guess we'll find out. But so, Vivi is there. What's going to happen next? I don't know. We'll find out. Hopefully in the next couple of weeks, we'll find out where Vivi's going to end up. Is she going to end up on Egghead with the Straw Hats, or is Morgan's going to be instrumental in like getting them out of there? If Vivi does end up with the Straw Hats, I'm quite certain that she is going to be welcomed with open arms by, the majority of the crew that know her, and then get an explanation from the rest of the crew as to like, who everybody else is, even though she's probably been following them with the bounty posters and everything. They'll probably want to do like a formal introduction to her. Also, we don't know where Karu is. Is Karu still at Marie-Joie? Because we did not see him at any point in time when Vivi was escaping. So is Karu at Marie-Joie? Is Karu with Igaram and Chaka and Pell and the rest of them? Is Karu somewhere else? I don't know. I want to know where the duck is, because Karu is like Vivi's loyal companion, best friend since she was a kid. So I don't know. We will find out eventually. So that's what I have. This video ended up being longer than I wanted it to be, but there's a lot to talk about with Vivi. So that's what I have. I thank you very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed the video. The next one I should be doing a video would be about getting into Skypiea stuff. So like Gonfall and Eneru. Probably not in the same video though, but that's what we have here for Vivi. So I thank you for watching, and I hope you have a nice rest of your day. Bye.